Welcome to Magic Watercolour Reveal. This is the card that I'm going to be creating. To create this card we're going to need a few supplies, so let me grab things and talk you through them. First of all, we need the Winter Cottage stamp set from Altenew, which is a 2" by 3" mini stamp set. We're going to use a sentiment from the Pinecone stamp set. We will also be using a embossing ink pad from Altenew, a watercolour brush marker in Evening Grey, a water brush pen, or you could use a paintbrush, some water in a spray bottle, a mini ink cube in Mocha, but you could use the oval, and a 2" by 3" clear acrylic block, which is also from Altenew. Our cardstock, we're going to need two different cardstocks, some craft card measuring 5.5 by 4¼ inch, and then some watercolour card measuring 5" by 3¾ inches. Okay, so I'm just going to tidy those things to one side and then we can get started. So the point of this video is to show you how I do this technique, and then hopefully you will do your take on the technique and share your projects with me in the Altenew fan group or on Instagram. So let's grab the Winter Cottage and pop that onto the acrylic block. I'm stamping using an acrylic block today and also having the Altenew stamping mat below, because that actually gives us some cushioning when stamping and gives a crisper impression. So the embossing ink is really important in this technique, and I love Altenew's embossing ink. It's sticky enough but doesn't leave residue. So we're just going to pop that onto our stamp, making sure to ink it up really well. And getting into all those nooks and crannies, we need a really good impression for this. So lots of embossing ink going onto the stamp. And then I'm going to add the stamp roughly 2/3 of the way up the cardstock. So I'm going to give that a really good push, but making sure that you keep one hand on the acrylic block at all times so it doesn't slip or skid. Really squishing down. That stamping mat is actually helping with that quite a lot. So you can't really see where you've stamped yet, but you will do soon. So adding some of the Evening Grey ink onto my mat, just squeezing it out of the brush marker, and then I'm going to add some water. I'm going to give that a little spritz, and then I'm going to use a water brush to mix the two together. And we're going to swipe backwards and forwards over where we stamped. Now initially you can't see anything because ink starts to slowly show up, but as it gets drawn into the cardstock, where the embossing ink is, you'll see a darker tone of ink. I don't know why this happens, it just does. It's like magic, hence the name of this technique. Just going to add a bit more, and now I'm actually going direct with the water brush marker. So just back and forth, slowly rubbing. If you rub too hard, you'll actually wear the surface of the cardstock and you'll get little bits of card start to come away, and that will really ruin your effect. Now this can also be done with the mini ink cubes or the ovals, which I'm going to show you now. But you could also use the watercolour pan set from Altenew. That works perfect as well. So just to show you this better on camera, I'm going to grab that mini cube and I'm using Mocha. Squidge some down onto my mat and then give it a spray of water again. I'm going to do exactly the same as we did to start with. Mix it up and then just swipe over the surface. Now this time you can see the magic starting to happen. There it is, that image is starting to pop through. Now some of you may remember those colouring books we had as kids, the magic painting, where you just added water to the page and the image comes through. It's just like that. So back and forth, adding some colouring, and it takes a minute for the ink to seep into the cardstock, but when it does, the image intensifies. Now I'm just going to have a little mop up of that ink at the side, because knowing me, I will get it everywhere. And I'm going to grab my heat gun and give this a little dry. So if we try from the top, sort of holding maybe 4 or 5 inches away from the cardstock, and then a little dry from below as well. This helps stop any warping and buckling of the card. It doesn't take long to dry because we didn't saturate the surface, but there you can see that image is looking more and more intensified now. So once that's dry, we'll pop that heat gun away. Hopefully you can see that image coming through. Sometimes it's quite hard to show on camera until it's 100% dry, but let's move on to our sentiment. As I said, this comes from the Pinecone stamp set. This stamp set is a brand new stamp set, so what I like to do with all new stamps is to prime them. Now the way in which I do this is to use an eraser. So in the UK you'll probably say rubber, but in America and Canada you might say eraser. So we're just going to rub that over the surface of the stamp lightly, and then I'll just use my thumb to wipe away any of the excess bits, because if they're left on the stamp it'll affect the impression that we get. I'm inking up with the Mocha ink and just popping that underneath our image just over to the right hand side. So really nice, clean, simple image, sentiment, sorry. So in my sample card you'll see that I've got some inky splatters, so that's our next step. We're going to squidge some ink onto our mat and add some water, and then I will use a really tiny paintbrush, this is my splatter paintbrush, to pick up some of that wateriness and just gently tap it around my image. Now if you tap from higher up or lower down you get different size splodges. You can play around and see what you create. Here I decided that I had enough splodges, but wait for it, me being me decided that no, that wasn't right and I wanted more, so I had to go back in with a second lot. But it's not a problem, it just takes a couple of seconds. So a bit more ink, going to spritz again, mix those up and then we can splatter. And actually I quite like this because it does give me two sort of intensities of inky splatters on my card. Sometimes it's just knowing when to stop yourself. So there we go, splattering around there. We're going to mop up that ink before I stick my hand in it. And then we're going to mount this panel onto some craft card. So you could use glue, double-sided tape, foam, it's up to you. I just so happen to have some foam pads to hand. I'm just using a pokey tool to take those off the backing, pop them onto my card. It's important when using foam pads or foam tape to make sure that you use enough so that your card is balanced, because if you don't you can end up with buckling and warping and it can sort of take away from your beautiful project. So just pulling the adhesive off the back, or the backing off the foam pad, sorry. Use my pokey tool, nice and quick and simple. And then we'll just pop this panel onto the craft card and we'll have a nice little border all the way around the edge. Nice and simple to do. And I like the fact that the craft card sort of works well with the colour of ink that we've used. So there's my sample card and my finished card. So now it's up to you to recreate these cards and share them with us in the Altenew fan group. I'd love to see what you make. Okay, thank you for watching and I'll be back with more soon. Bye.